Cathie Wood has been a prominent figure in the public fund management space, discussing Bitcoin since around 2015. In a recent interview, she was asked about the potential impact of a spot Bitcoin ETF on institutional adoption in 2024. She emphasizes that while a spot Bitcoin ETF is not a replacement for self-custody, it is crucial for institutional exposure to Bitcoin. Without the green light from the SEC, institutions would likely hesitate to consider Bitcoin seriously. An ETF provides an accessible on-ramp for these institutions, packaged in a format they understand and trust. Wood also highlights that based on Ark Invest's research, institutional involvement in a new asset class is the most significant driver of price appreciation. She believes that institutions are beginning to recognize Bitcoin as a new asset class, which is important because new asset classes typically offer a low correlation of returns and increased returns per unit of risk. This recognition is crucial as institutions compete against each other and cannot afford to ignore a burgeoning asset class like Bitcoin. Alden discusses the rise of various Bitcoin movements around the world, highlighting how these grassroots movements are creating a cascade effect, inspiring more communities to adopt Bitcoin. She points out the unstoppable nature of this bottom-up adoption, which is difficult to replicate and incredibly powerful, especially in regions that need it the most.
And one of the reasons it is becoming more top of mind for institutions is they are buying into this notion that Bitcoin is ringing the bell for a new asset class. We did a paper with Coinbase with that title in 2016. It's truly a new asset class, and institutions cannot dismiss a new asset class. Why? A new asset class typically means low correlation of returns, and it typically means, therefore, increased returns per unit of risk. And so these institutions cannot ignore it. They're competing against one another. And that is why I think it's going to be a very big deal for this new asset class. Of course, for a time there, the leadership at BlackRock was not so favorably disposed to Bitcoin. So that was very big, just that. And I think that happened, Yassine, was that 9 months ago, something like that? Might have been longer, more than a year ago, perhaps. So that got the brain cells going in the institutional world. And another thing did as well, and it was before BlackRock, Cambridge Associates, which is a consultant primarily to institutions, I think endowments, foundations, and pension funds, in 2018 wrote a paper and said, okay, asset allocators, you may not be predisposed to liking this thing called Bitcoin, but you better study it and develop a stronger point of view, because it does appear to be a new asset class. So since 2000, that's 5 years now, we've had that kind of thought roaming around, and the excuse was, oh, the SEC hasn't blessed it. Now they'll have no excuse. And if you just talk about 1% of trillions and trillions of dollars, or 1% allocation, well, the scarcity value of Bitcoin will shine through next year if institutions do indeed decide they must gain access to this new asset class.
Alden emphasizes the rise of small Bitcoin communities around the world. She notes the significance of grassroots adoption in places like Bitcoin Beach, Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, Bitcoin Easy in South Africa, and Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala. Alden points out that while the focus is often on large-scale developments like ETFs or nation-state adoption, the real transformative power of Bitcoin lies in its ability to empower small communities and individuals, especially in regions with multiple currencies, capital controls, and conversion frictions. Let us now get back to the video, as Alden talks about what she looks forward to for Bitcoin as an asset class. To Alden, ETFs are cool, but Bitcoin communities are way cooler.
People are focused on things like ETFs or nation-state adoption. I like small community adoption. And so Bitcoin Beach was an early one, and that inspired a nation. And that was kind of a special case. But now you see, for example, there's Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica. There's Bitcoin Cathie in South Africa. There's Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala. There's the Indonesia Bitcoin Conference hosted by a woman named Dia. There's now for 2 years running. And then there's the Africa Bitcoin Conference in Ghana hosted by a woman named Farida. And so when you see in the developed world these kind of questions like, what is Bitcoin's use case, or it's a solution in search of a problem, it's like, well, broaden your scope and look around the world.
Bitcoin has turned positive again during a roller coaster start to the year, recouping a portion of losses from a flash crash Wednesday. With investors shaking off concern that US regulators won't authorize exchange-traded funds to directly hold the digital asset. The largest cryptocurrency tumbled as much as 9.22 days ago, or the most on an intraday basis, since November 2022. After Matrix Port analyst Marcus Thielen wrote in a note that he expects the Securities and Exchange Commission to reject all Bitcoin ETF proposals this month. Bloomberg intelligence analysts estimate that there is about a 90% probability the SEC will approve the ETFs by January 10th. US spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, ETFs, appear to be on the verge of launching after the exchanges that will list them filed amended documents suggesting they expect US Securities and Exchange Commission approval in the coming days. The amended 19B4 filings filed on behalf of BlackRock, Grayscale, Fidelity, and others. Joined last month cemented S1 filings, addressing feedback from the US Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. More than a dozen applicants hope to launch the first spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US. It's likely multiple issuers will be approved simultaneously. One of the individuals told CoinDesk that filing the amendments did not mean approvals were guaranteed, but said they were optimistic. A final deadline for SEC action for at least one application by Ark 21 shares is January 10th, suggesting the regulator may approve all of the final applications it is comfortable with by that date. This filing is another important step towards uplisting GBTC as a spot Bitcoin ETF. Grayscale spokeswoman Jen Rosenthal said in a statement, referring to the company's Bitcoin trust, that it wants to turn into an ETF. At Grayscale, we continue to work collaboratively with the SEC, and we remain ready to operate GBTC as an ETF upon receipt of regulatory approvals. The regulatory agency needs to approve both the 19B4 filings and the S1 filings before the ETFs can launch.